All right, let's dive into one of the most powerful and honestly one of the most controversial parts of the Indian Constitution. We're talking about the emergency powers. So here's a huge question, right? How does a democracy actually handle a major crisis? I mean, think about it. War, a massive rebellion, a total financial collapse. How can the government act fast and strong without, throwing its democratic values out the window? Well, India's answer to that is pretty unique, and it's all built into a powerful set of constitutional tools. So, the best way to think about this is like the Constitution has this special emergency toolkit. It's locked away only to be brought out in the absolute most extreme situations. These are the emergency provisions, tucked away in Part 18, and they basically give the central government these incredible, extraordinary powers to handle what the text calls abnormal situations, and ultimately to protect the country. Okay, so what's actually in this toolkit? Well, there are three totally different kinds of emergencies, and each one has its own specific trigger and its own unique set of powers. Let's break them down one by one. First up, we've got the big one, the national emergency. This is all laid out in Article 352, and believe me, it's the most sweeping power of them all. This is the tool for crises that threaten the entire country. Now, you can't just declare a national emergency for any old reason. The grounds are super specific: war, external aggression, or armed rebellion. And I want you to really focus on that last one, armed rebellion. See, it used to say internal disturbance, which is pretty vague, right? It could mean almost anything. The 44th Amendment changed it to armed rebellion, which is a much, much higher bar to clear. That change is a huge deal, a critical safeguard we're definitely going to talk more about.
And listen, declaring one isn't easy. It's not something that can happen on a whim. The process is incredibly strict. First, the president has to get written advice from the entire cabinet, not just the prime minister, the whole team. Then, once the proclamation is made, Parliament has to approve it within 1 month. And not just with a simple majority. It needs a special majority. We're talking a serious, overwhelming consensus here.
So what happens the moment one is declared? Well, the whole power dynamic of the country just flips on its head. That federal structure India has, where states have their own areas of control, it basically disappears, and the country becomes, for all practical purposes, a unitary system. The central government suddenly gets the power to make laws on any subject on the state list. It's a massive shift. All right, let's look at the second tool in our emergency kit. This is the state emergency, which is laid out in Article 356, but you've probably heard it called by its more common name, President's Rule. So this gets triggered when, as the Constitution puts it, there's a failure of constitutional machinery in a state. Basically, the state government can't function properly. Typically, the state's governor sends a report, and based on that, the president can just dismiss the elected state government and take over. The governor then runs the show on behalf of the center. Now, this one is historically very controversial. It's been criticized a lot for being used as a political weapon to get rid of state governments run by opposition parties. And that brings us to the third and final tool in the kit, the financial emergency, under Article 360. As the name suggests, this one is all about tackling a really severe economic crisis. So if the financial stability or the credit of India is under threat, this can be declared. And the effects, they are huge. The center can essentially take control over all state finances. It can even order salary cuts for all government employees, and I mean all of them, right up to the judges of the Supreme Court. But here's a wild fact for you. After all these decades, through all the economic ups and downs India has faced, guess how many times a financial emergency has actually been declared? The answer is 0. Not once. It's the one power in the toolkit that's never ever been used. Okay, so having all these incredibly powerful tools is one thing. But the big question is, how do you stop them from being misused? And that brings us to the really crucial part, the constitutional safeguards. And when we talk about safeguards, the absolute king is the 44th Amendment. This was passed in the late 70s, pretty much as a direct response to the controversial 1975 emergency. It built in some critical safety levers. We already talked about one, changing internal disturbance to the much stricter armed rebellion. But it also did things like making that written advice from the whole cabinet mandatory to make sure a prime minister couldn't just decide to do it on their own. This all leads to maybe the most important question for you, for me, for everyone. What happens to our fundamental rights during an emergency? Can the government just flip a switch and turn them off? Well, the answer is, it's a bit complicated. So let's break down the two key articles here. First, you've got Article 358. This one is automatic. The moment a national emergency is declared because of war or external aggression, poof, Article 19, your freedom of speech and expression is suspended. Just like that. But then you have Article 359, which works differently. It's not automatic. It gives the president the power to issue a specific order that says you can't go to court to enforce certain other fundamental rights. But, and this is probably the most important thing to remember in this whole discussion, thanks again to that 44th Amendment, two of your rights are absolutely sacred. They are untouchable. We're talking about Article 20, which protects you from being convicted arbitrarily, and Article 21, the big one, the right to life and personal liberty. These two can never, ever be suspended, no matter what. They're the absolute bedrock. When you really step back and look at all this, you see what it's really about. It's this incredibly delicate and difficult balancing act. It's that constant push and pull between the power a country needs to keep itself safe and the liberty that every single citizen deserves to have. So let's do a quick recap of the key takeaways. You've got the 3 tools in the emergency kit: national under 352, state under 356, and financial under 360. While some of your fundamental rights can be put on pause during a crisis, the most important thing to remember is that 2 of them are sacrosanct: Article 20 and 21. Your right to life and personal liberty is non-negotiable. And that really leaves us with the big, lingering question, doesn't it? In a real crisis, where do you draw that line? The line between national security on one side and individual freedom on the other. It's a question that every democracy has to grapple with, constantly,